male, which we are going to see in today's first match. But we're going to take a look at Juan's team first. It is going to be that Amoonguss Incineroar, Flamigo, Goldango, Porygon 2, and Ursaluna. And we talked about this a little bit before stream, of course, and it is weird to say that Flamigo has become a little bit of a standard Pokemon. But, you know, that dual wing beat is just one of the best answers against the most popular Pokemon in Regulation H, which is, of course, that Sneasler. Because if it has that Focus Sash, you know, dual wing beat can still take it out.
Yeah, it's great into Sneasler with the dual wing beat being able to break the Focus Sash. There's also the scrappy close combat being able to hit Goldengo for super effective damage is very, very nice on a team like the comp that we see here with the Porygon 2 and the Amoonguss, both of which get walled out by Goldengo quite hard. So unless you can position your Ursaluna under Trick Room, Goldengo is very tricky unless you have a fighting type that can hit it despite the fact that it is a Ghost type for super effective damage.
Yeah, I also love that Juan is playing the Mental Herb on the Amoonguss. In my opinion, a very underrated item for this Pokemon. And although Maksim doesn't have a taunt user on his team, still, you know, generally not a bad item to have on Amoonguss because, you know, if you can't taunt it and it can get off just one spore, you know, that can really be a game changer and also, you know, help this Porygon 2 maybe set up a Trick Room for the Ursaluna. So a lot of potential there as well.
Yeah, you're right in that a lot of the time you'll see counterplay against a team like this be taunt the Amoonguss on turn 1, Porygon 2 gets the Trick Room up, and now the Amoonguss is kind of forced to switch because it's not really putting on any pressure. Obviously, this one has Sludge Bomb as well, so that's a little bit different here. But that Mental Herb means that even if you taunt the Amoonguss turn 1, it's still getting a spore off on turn 2.
Yeah, and then I'd say let's take a look at Maksim Leader's team next. That is going to be the Indeedee, male form this time though. The Delphox, Annihilate, Sneasler, Whimsicott, and Dragapult.
So yes, this is a very, very aggressive team. It's an interesting matchup because normally teams like this, which are very frail, very fast, struggle a little bit into Trick Room, but the Indeedee male here does have the Imprison, which stops the Trick Room going up from Juan Manuel's side. So that's going to be an interesting lead matchup, I think, of if you see, for example, the Indeedee Delphox lead with the threat of double expanding force. Do you go very aggressive, click the double expanding force and try and just KO whatever's in front of you at the start? Or do you go for that Imprison, stop the Trick Room mode from going up in the first place?
Yeah, I think the Imprison in this matchup is the more reliable counter to Trick Room because as we talked about, you know, the Amoonguss having the Mental Herb, if you had a taunt user, would still be threatened by that Pokemon, but if you can just stop the Trick Room from going out by going for an Imprison, then that is going to be, you know, not easy for Juan's Ursaluna, especially since, you know, his other Pokemon like the Flamigo and the Goldango probably don't do very well against the Delphox. So gonna be an interesting matchup for sure. And I believe game 1 is ready, so I think we can head into that in just a second.
Okay, so we see a Dragapult Indeedee lead. Instead of maybe the Dragapult Delphox we might have expected, and the lead on the other end is Goldango and Flamigo. So the Goldango here, I think, is in a very good position, because if you look at the moves that are available to the two Pokemon in front of it, you've got maybe a Phantom Force from Dragapult can do some damage, but that's a 2-turn move, and Indeedee can't really hit it at all with Terra Blast. Being immune, it's Terra Fighting as well, so it can't Terra into an offensive Terra type, and Expanding Force being resisted. So this Goldango is very well positioned right now.
Yeah, even if the Dragon, as you mentioned, goes for the Phantom Force, then Juan does have some switch-in opportunities for that Pokemon. But the question, I guess, if you're Juan here is, you know, do you just go for a Make It Rain, or do you just try to maybe set up a nasty plot? Flamigo is just going to go for a Protect turn 1, so, you know, maybe doesn't want to get hit by something like an Expanding Force. And the Dragapult is actually going to go for that Phantom Force, so the Goldango is going to have to watch out next turn. And it is just going to go for a Make It Rain here, take that Indeedee down to very, very low health, drop that special attack, so probably going to switch out next turn. And the Indeedee is probably just going to go for an Expanding Force here, but yeah, Flamigo protecting itself.
Interesting to note that the Goldango on Juan Manuel's side is faster than Maksim's Indeedee, which suddenly makes this next turn a bit scary. Because depending on how much damage you think a Phantom Forces do, maybe you could Terrastalize your Goldango to get another Make It Raid off. Or, as we saw, we've got the Incineroar on the back, which can now comfortably take those Phantom Forces, and also is not really threatened at all by the Expanding Force. So I'd expect that the Phantom Force here is going to go into that Golden Go slot. I guess we'll have to wait and see. There is a chance you could go for the hit into Flamigo, just as a mix-up. But again, I think Maksim committing to that 2-turn move gives Juan Manuel the ability to just pivot around it.
Yeah, and the Goldango is going to switch out, so no terrestrialization. Going to switch in that Incineroar. Very good Pokemon to take that Phantom Force if the Dragapult decides to target the Goldango. As you just mentioned, could have gone into the Flamigo as well. We're going to have to see, but no, it is just going to be into that Incineroar. Takes it relatively well, and the Flamigo is going to go for a close combat and just take out this Indeedee before it can attack again.
Yeah, again, seeing that the Golden Go was faster than Indeedee will probably say to Juan Manuel that the Flamigo is also faster than Indeedee, because I would expect that Flamigo is going to be faster than Golden Go. So that's a very safe turn from Juan Manuel. There's no risk, even if the Phantom Force does go into the Flamigo slot, of the Flamigo going down because of that Focus Sash, and you get a guaranteed KO on the Indeedee because it does not have Protect. That, or you get a big close combat on whatever switches in.
Yeah, and now the Sneasler coming in is going to boost its special defense through the Psychic Seed. Not really going to do much here against both of these physical attackers, but yeah, is going to threaten that Incineroar, which, you know, does have the option to maybe, you know, it's not Terra Ghost, it is Terra Grass, but, you know, might still take decent damage from a close combat from a Sneasler. It is the most used Pokemon right now for a reason. And I guess interesting to note here is that the Sneasler also has Throat Chop, so if the Goldango should come back in, you know, it definitely has to respect that move as well. And yeah, Juan is just going to switch out this Incineroar and going to bring in that Amoonguss this time. Dragapult, of course, is locked into the Phantom Force, so would be forced to go for that again. And Amoonguss is going to take this close combat very, very nicely. And yeah, no switch from the Dragapult, so it is going to go for another Phantom Force. But now this Flamigo is still open to, you know, maybe just go for a dual Wing Beat and just take out the Sneasler. And
that's why we don't run dual Wing Beat.
That's exactly why we don't. That is unfortunately, yeah, one of the downsides is that 90% accuracy means it can.
But this is very well positioned by Juan Manuel here, bringing that Amoonguss in. Knowing that Dragapult is locked into that 2-turn move means that now you can't KO the Flamigo with just the Sneasler, so Sneasler doesn't protect, you get a chance to hit it with a dual Wing Beat, or miss in this case. But with the Amoonguss coming in, you get another chance next turn because you can redirect both of those attacks, and then you have another dual Wing Beat, or a close combat into the Dragapult lined up.
And we are going to see our first terrestrialization of today's best of 3. Here it is going to be on the Sneasler, which is going to Terra into that Dark type. So going to boost those Throat Chops if it decides to go for that. And, you know, the Fighting type is gone now, so is the Flying weakness, but it has already lost some defenses, and the Amoonguss is going for a Rage Powder. The Dire Claw is going to get any status. No, it isn't. Amoonguss goes down to this Phantom Force. But if this Flamigo decides to go for another dual Wing Beat, you know, if the defense drops, the Sneasler happened before. Oh, might just barely missed the KO on the Sneasler.
Just enough to hold on. So, Maksim, clearly knowing how much damage that was going to do, had the Terra Dark lined up as a defensive terrestrialization, but still a tricky position, I think, for Maksim, because this Dragapult, again, being locked into that 2-turn move is a bit of a problem, but one of the biggest upsides of Phantom Force, other than just being a strong Ghost-type move, is the fact that it does break through Protect, which means that if you can get rid of one more Pokemon here, if you can knock out the Incineroar or the Flamigo, then suddenly that is an unprotectable Phantom Force going into the Golden Go, which is a big threat here. And as you said, there's the Throat Chop on Sneasler. So it's a bit of a weird position for Maksim. He has to be very careful with how he's targeting with his Phantom Force. So Juan Manuel has maybe a bit of a guessing game almost to play on the other side. But I think this match could still go either way.
Yeah, and Juan going for another defensive switch here, probably expecting a close combat and switching in the Goldango here, but Sneasler just going for a Protect here. So maybe, you know, seeing if Juan decides to switch or stay in. Dragapult gonna go for another Phantom Force here. And yeah, I think in Maksim's position, you might have to go for a few reads. You know, you could have gone for the read here that, okay, Juan has gone for a lot of defensive switches this game so far. So, you know, he might go for another one, bring in that Goldango. But, you know, you can also just play it safe and just go for that Protect and maybe scout out if, you know, maybe Juan switches up his playstyle a little bit mid-match. But yeah, Sneasler here is still threatened by that Flamigo, but it is the fastest Pokemon on the field, so can definitely still get a move off before it goes down.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see where this Phantom Force is targeting this turn. If Maksim has made that read and hits the Golden Go, that's going to be a big knockout this turn. It's always very satisfying with Phantom Force making a read a turn ahead of time. But like I said, Juan Manuel's playing not a guessing game, but he's having to play very carefully around where he thinks this Phantom Force is going to go, and that is going to be the key thing this turn. Because Sneasler is obviously outputting a lot of pressure, but it has been intimidated twice, so its damage output is greatly reduced. It's going to be the Dragapult that's doing the most damage here.
Yeah, and the close combat actually going into that Goldango, and the Phantom Force going into the Incineroar, so Maksim not getting those reads correctly this turn, and the Shadow Ball is just going to take out that Goldango, no problem. And now the Sneasler is still on the field, although, you know, it is at very low HP, and it is at -2, but, you know, Juan's Pokemon have all been damaged quite a bit, so, you know, wouldn't be surprised if it can still get a knockout here somewhere. And now this Choice Scarf Annihilate is coming in, and, oh, now Maksim really has to think about, you know, do I lock into the Shadow Claw or, you know, the close combat? Because you can either hit the Incineroar or the Goldango, but, you know, whatever move you lock into, you're not going to hit the other Pokemon very well with it.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one here, because you're almost forced to lock into Shadow Claw, because if you lock into close combat and your Sneasler goes down, then suddenly Golden Go wins the game on the spot. But at the same time, Shadow Claw is a very weak move, and as you said, it can't really hit Incineroar. So there's the flip side of if you lock into Shadow Claw and your Sneasler goes down, Incineroar just wins the game. So it's a very tricky position having this back-end Choice Scarf Annihilate. I think Maksim has left himself a little bit vulnerable to Golden Go with the Pokemon he's brought this game. And it's looking like Juan Manuel is doing a good job of exploiting that.
And Juan is going to now terrestrialize the Goldango into the Dragon type, which means, you know, on the one hand it can be hit by close combat, but, you know, is going to take those throat chops even better, especially with Sneasler being at -2. And yeah, Sneasler protecting itself from the Incineroar. So the Annihilate is open to go for a move here, and it is going to be that Shadow Claw, and the Goldango just holds on, goes for another Shadow Ball here. Will it take out the Annihilate? Yes, it will.
Yeah, Annihilate going down to that Life Orb boosted Shadow Ball. It's a lot of damage on a super effective hit. That, I think, is always going to KO the Annihilate. But now Sneasler, it may be the most annoying Pokemon in the game, but it can't win a 1 versus 3 like this one.
No, probably not, or definitely not, especially since it can only target one Pokemon at a time. So really all Juan has to do here is just attack with both of his Pokemon, and he will be able to take this game 1. And yeah, I think you said it very well. Okay, a Dire Claw Sleeve just
There's
for
the
good
Dire Claw
measure.
Sleeve.
But not gonna matter here at this point. But yeah, we couldn't have a Sneasler game without a Dire Claw Sleeve, of course. So, you know, just had to get that out before this first game goes to an end. But yeah, I think you said it well when you said that Maksim kind of left himself open to that Goldango. And, you know, the Dragapult, just, you know, the Phantom Force really just didn't hit the correct targets, I think, all game long.
Yeah, it's a very hard one to try and make calls with, because your opponent does have a lot of time. Obviously, they know that the Phantom Force is coming. They've got a turn to switch and pivot around it. And again, they have to try and call which slot that's coming into. So it becomes a little bit difficult. I think in this next game, it would be a wise move for Maksim to bring the Delphox with him, because Delphox puts a lot of pressure on the Amoonguss and the Golden Go that we saw from Juan Manuel's side. And if you can force a terrestrialization on the Golden Go, then even if you can't then pick up the KO with Delphox, you end up in a position where now your Dragapult can hit it for super effective damage with its Dragon moves. It's now no longer immune to Sneasler's 2 best attacks. So I think the change-up I would like to see is the Delphox applying pressure in the early game. That was the lead I expected from Maksim in Game 1, as the Delphox in DD, so we'll see if he makes that adjustment in Game 2. Interesting to see if there are any adjustments from Juan Manuel's side, if he sticks with that Flamigo Golden Go lead, that kind of faster mode, because we did see the Golden Go is faster than the Indeedee, as is the Flamigo, so that is very much a point in Juan Manuel's favor if he goes for that lead, or he could switch up and try and maybe go for the Trick Room mode, but as we said earlier, with the Imprison there, that is a little bit risky.
Yeah, and even though, you know, the Incineroar does threaten the Delphox technically does have Focus Blast, but also Maksim, of course, has a Sneasler and an Annihilate, which are both, you know, really good against the Incineroar. So yeah, I believe Game 2 is ready. Let's see if, you know, Maksim adjusts in any way, or maybe Juan adjusts, predicting some adjustments as well. And it is going to be Sneasler and Dragapult this time up against, once again, Goldengo and Flamigo.
See, this lead I think is interesting as well because you now have the threat of Throat Chop and Dragon-type attack to pin the Goldengo with the Terrestrialization. But you need to be wary of the Wide Guard on Flamigo because that will stop Dragon Darts. So if you want to lock into a Dragon move completely safely, you might have to Outrage. But then obviously that becomes a coin flip on which slot that targets.
Yeah, but the thing is, if the Flamigo goes for a Wide Guard, that of course means it does not go for dual Wing Beat and doesn't target down that Sneasler. And that then, can honestly even just go for a Dire Claw on Flamigo as well, or just Throat Chop the Goldengo. So a lot of things both players, I think, have to keep in mind here.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting turn one. I think it's calls on turn one to see who clicks the right buttons. We do see a Terrestrialization here, and it is the Sneasler from Maksim. This time, I think, a more offensive Terrestrialization, but again, same as last time, it does let it get around that dual Wing Beat from Flamigo.
Yeah, and it is going to be a double Terrestrialization here in this game too. So yeah, first game, both players kind of took their time with it, but here just going straight for it is going to be that Flamigo Terrestrializing into that Ghost type. So maybe just trying to dodge a fake, or no, Sneasler doesn't even have fake out, so yeah, maybe just defensive terror here. Dragon Darts coming out, going to do about half to Flamigo, but Goldengo taking that very well. And it is going to be a Throat Chop into the Goldengo, which is just going to take it out. I'm not sure right now what the Terra Ghost from the Flamigo was, or Matt. Am I missing something?
I mean, the Terra Ghost on Flamigo does allow it to resist both of Sneasler's stab moves, so the moves that get boosted by that same type attack bonus, the fighting and poison moves. But as we saw there, it doesn't really help very much against that Dragon Darts. And now Maksim said, I don't need Delphox. I'm just going to clear out this Goldengo myself very early. And now this is suddenly a much stronger position for Maksim. This Amoonguss is threatening Spores, but there's also the Dragapult just clicking Dragon Darts here is very threatening as well. There is the Wide Guard, as we mentioned earlier, on Flamigo, which can stop that. But Amoonguss is not doing very much just by itself. So if you click Wide Guard here, as you were saying last turn, you're now not clicking an attack with Flamigo.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the great thing about Dragon Darts is, if the Flamigo does decide to protect, then both those Dragon Darts just hit into Amoonguss, and then maybe a follow-up from Sneasler could maybe just take it out. That Incineroar coming in here, not going to be able to intimidate the Dragapult, but will get a -1 attack on the Sneasler. It is just going to go for another Dragon Dart to get a critical hit on that Amoonguss, so bringing it down to just barely above half. A little bit of damage to the Incineroar, but now this Dire Claw here will not take the Amoonguss out, but will paralyze it. Is it going to stop a Spore from coming through? No, it isn't, so the Dragapult is going to be put to sleep.
Dragapult is going to sleep now, and with the Incineroar on the field, there's now the threat of knockoff into Dragapult dealing big damage. But the Sneasler, even though it's now at -1, is threatening a close combat into that Incineroar. That's going to do a lot of damage. There is the Ghost Flamigo in the back to potentially resist that. But if you switch out your Incineroar, now you're suddenly not hitting that Dragapult for any damage. So this could potentially be a Rage Powder and knockoff, just to clear out the Dragapult, which is putting on a lot of pressure at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, this Dragapult here, maybe at this point, the question is, because it has to sleep for at least one turn, can you still bring it into a position where, you can give it a chance to wake up and still do some damage? But yeah, Amoonguss is gonna heal up a little bit through the regenerator ability, bring in that Flamigo once again. Sneasler gonna go for a Protect. Wouldn't be surprised if we maybe just saw a knockoff here from the Incineroar. Dragapult gonna take that mandatory sleep turn right there, and it is just gonna be a knockoff on the Dragapult, which will just take it out.
I think Juan Manuel felt safe to go for that there, thinking that the -1 close combat is not going to get the knockout on his Incineroar. So maybe Maksim could have played a bit more aggressively on account of that. I don't think there's really much threat of damage. I guess the Pollen Puff maybe from Amoonguss could have knocked out the Sneasler. But now the Dragapult goes down. That's a big threat taken down from Juan Manuel, but he's running very low on offensive pieces now. If the Flamigo goes down, it's just Incineroar and Amoonguss, both typically very defensive Pokemon. And there's still a hidden Pokemon in the back from Maksim that we've not yet seen.
Yeah, and here actually I really like the Terra Ghost on Flamigo because, it does make you immune to close combats. And maybe you know, this Annihilate might be forced to lock into Shadow Claw again, you know, just to hit that Ghost type, and then, you know, doesn't hit the Incineroar very well. And Flamigo just gonna go for a Protect, and Amoonguss gonna take a close combat from this Annihilate, which is gonna lower its defenses. And is the Sneasler gonna target into the Amoonguss as well? No, it is just gonna hit into that protecting Flamigo.
So the close combat there to try and hit the Incineroar makes sense, but now you're in a tricky position with this Annihilate where you've got one Pokemon that's immune to close combat and an Amoonguss that is resisting it. So potentially this could be an Annihilate switch, but that could be punished with a Spore maybe. So, like you said, the Terra Ghost making this Annihilate's life a little bit difficult because, again, you end up with that situation that we had in Game 1 where if you lock into Shadow Claw, you can't really hit the Amoonguss for any damage, but if you lock into close combat, we're seeing the situation you see now where the Amoonguss and the Flamigo are really not very scared of that close combat at all.
Yeah, and the Amoonguss, you know, if it keeps switching out again, you know, switching in that Incineroar for some Intimidates, which, I mean, you know, with the Annihilate on the field, you don't want to give it that Defiant boost, but yeah, this Amoonguss, I think, could still be very, very problematic for Maksim. But Indeedee coming in here now, gonna give that Psychic Seed boost to the Sneasler, as Amoonguss is just gonna go for a Rage Powder, so no Spores this turn, which could give the Indeedee an opportunity to go for an attack next turn. It is just gonna be a Throat Chop here into the Amoonguss, but because of the Intimidates, of course, not gonna be enough to take it out, and now the Close Combat will take out the Sneasler. And yeah, of course, the Expanding Force here does threaten the Amoonguss, but Flamigo is still on the field. It can still go for Wide Guards.
Yeah, we've got the Wide Guard threat from Flamigo, but I guess it's a case of, is the Amoonguss now in close combat range from the Annihilate? Is the question. Because I think you have to lock into close combat here, because otherwise the Incineroar in the back really, I think, just beats both of these Pokemon. But as we saw in Game 1, Flamigo is faster than this Indeedee, so that's a potential way out of this game for Juan Manuel. If this Indeedee is knocked out, if the Annihilate is knocked out, then Incineroar pretty comfortably will, or should be able to deal with an Indeedee you'd expect. But the Incineroar is kind of low on health, so it's an interesting endgame. I think the lack of speed on Indeedee is coming back to bite Maksim again, though, here.
Yeah, and the Terra has been used on Sneasler because, you know, otherwise there could have been that Terra fighting, Terra Blast potential for the Incineroar. But yeah, not gonna happen in the second game here. And the Amoonguss is actually going to be paralyzed, so no Rage Powders this turn. The Annihilate is going to get a close combat off to finish it off. So yeah, Maksim may be expecting that Rage Powder there, so the paralysis is not really mattering. And the Indeedee, you know, it is still full HP, so it does still have its Focus Sash, but there is, of course, the dual Wing Beat here, which is just going to take out that Annihilate after those defense drops. So yeah, if dual Wing Beat hits, it is really good against those fighting types on Maksim's team. And yeah, Indeedee here is going to be able to go for a Expanding Force, and that will take out the Flamigo, but now it is just Indeedee versus Incineroar, I believe.
Yes, so it's a case of, can 2 Terra Blasts KO the Incineroar? If it can, Indeedee wins. If they can't, then Incineroar wins. Both players know what buttons they're clicking. It's just going to be Terra Blast and Knock Off from both players.
I think my money's on the Incineroar here.
I think my money's on the Incineroar as well. It is a slower Indeedee, might have more special attack investment though. That's a lot of damage.
That is way more damage than I expected. I mean, it is, you know, Indeedee, of course, being a normal type, does get a stab boost from that Terra Blast. But, you know, we are talking about an Incineroar here. Is this Terra Blast going to knock it out?
It takes it out!
I guess we would have both lost money here, Matt. Indeedee pulls through for Maksim here in the second game.
The last minute hero Indeedee with that Focus Sash saving it from the knockoff. Like you said, the Terra Blast, it's similar to Porygon 2. The Terra Blast being a normal type move before you Terastallize means it does get that same type attack bonus, so it's doing 50% more damage. So it's not a weak move, and as we saw, the Indeedee is not as fast as it could be, which means that maybe it's trained more in its special attack, so it's going to be doing more damage, which I think is what we saw there. So the lack of speed meant that it struggled into the Flamigo, but did better into the Incineroar, so it's kind of swings and roundabouts on the way that's trained.
Yeah, but still no Delphox in that second game, which, I think even though you won that second game, if you're Maxim, it was probably, closer than you wanted it to be. So maybe that Delphox, could come out in that third game.
Yeah, it's a strange one as well, because the turn 1 of that game, getting the knockout on the Golden Go immediately was huge. But if Juan Manuel just goes for a Protect there maybe, or leads something different, maybe goes for like Amoonguss and Golden Go as the lead, just to safely set the Golden Go up, then suddenly the Sneasler Dragapult lead is looking a bit less useful. So I think both players have the opportunity now to try and change it up a little bit. I think Juan Manuel could maybe bring the Flamigo in the back end rather than the front, because we saw the Flamigo was putting a lot of pressure on this team with the dual wing beat, taking out the Sneasler and the Annihilate. Close combat, as strange as it sounds, being very threatening into Dragapult, and obviously just into this really, really aggressive team from Maksim. Just having a Focus Sash by itself is already a huge bonus. So we can maybe see a mix-up to have the Flamigo come in the back end. Also, we saw that there was no Indeedee lead this time from Maksim, so maybe Juan Manuel could think, okay, without Indeedee leading, then how does Maksim stop me getting Trick Room up? So he could potentially lead maybe Incineroar and Porygon 2, for example.
Yeah, that's of course also a way to adjust, is that you still bring the same 4 Pokemon, but you just change up the leads a little bit. I believe in that first and second game, both players brought the exact same 4 Pokemon. And I believe game 3 is ready, so I'd say let's just hop into that and see if there are any adjustments from either player this time. Are we going to see the Delphox? Yes, we are! Standing next to the Sneasler here, facing off against the Amoonguss and Flamigo. So this time also a switch up here for Juan.
We do see the Amoonguss, but I was expecting it to be next to the Golden Go for that potential setup. But instead we see it next to the Flamigo. Flamigo again threatening Wide Guard, which means that Delphox can't completely safely lock into Heat Wave here. But we could see maybe an Overheat going down into Amoonguss to try and get the one-shot on that without having to worry about all that Wide Guard.
Yeah, you could also just go for an Overheat into the Amoonguss, which is why, Juan might be thinking about going for that Terra Water on the Amoonguss, because it is really one of your most valuable Pokemon in this matchup, so you definitely don't want to lose it right away. The Flamigo is actually just going to switch out, so no Wide Guards in this turn 1, and Incineroar is going to come in here, get that Intimidate on the Sneasler once again, and threaten Fake Out in the next turn. But of course, Maxim might have that Psychic Terrain in the back, and it is just going to be a Terra here on what I believe was the Amoonguss, or no, it is the Sneasler, my bad. Is going to Terra into that Dark type once again, and probably go for maybe just another Throat Chop, maybe Maxim trying to just take out this Amoonguss here right away, which is going to go for that Terra Water.
Yeah, we see the Terra from both sides, so very early commitment from both players here. The Sneasler, again, I think terrestrializing to get out of range of a KO from the dual wing beat, but Juan Manuel really getting the better of that with the Incineroar switching. But we get the Diaclaw Sleep!
There it is.
Oh, no.
No spores, and it is just going to be an Expanding Force here, bringing that Amoonguss down to very low health, but of course not affecting that Incineroar, but that is a huge Diaclaw Sleep. If either Sneasler or Delphox would have gone to sleep here, that would have been really bad for Maxim.
Interestingly, the Expanding Force there is a very safe move for Maxim to click, because without the Indeedee on the field, it's not a spread type move. So it's not going to be blocked by that Wide Guard. And Amoonguss on this team does not have Protect. So that's a pretty safe play there, and rewarded with a Diaclaw Sleep, which is going to be pivotal, I think, in this game. But Incineroar's still pretty well positioned. The close combat into that Incineroar slot still going to hurt, but it's threatening to shut down the Delphox, which is now forced to switch out.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that, but you're right. Without the Psychic Terrain, Expanding Force being a single target move, we've seen so much Expanding Force in Scarlet and Violet so far, but you rarely see it just used outside of Psychic Terrain. But here, Indeedee now is going to come in here, give that Psychic Seed boost to the Sneasler, so also boost its speed. Goldengo switching in here instead of the Amoonguss. So, gotta be able to take maybe close combat, but it is just gonna go into this Incineroar. Gotta be able to hang on thanks to that Intimidate. That is, of course, free now to maybe go for a knockout of here onto the Indeedee. So, yeah, the Delphox very happy to not be in that slot right now.
Indeedee living with its Focus Sash there. It's now in range to Terra Blast the Incineroar for a knockout, but the Golden Go, again being faster than the Indeedee, is going to be a problem now for Maksim. Because you're now... There's the threat of just clicking Make It Rain here, and I don't think an Intimidated Throat Chop, even with the Pterodot, is going to be enough to take out the Golden Go here.
Yeah, but, yeah, probably not. I'd say definitely not, unless you get a critical hit, of course. Don't want to jinx it. But, yeah, this Incineroar being at such low health now, and the Amoonguss being asleep, that's already two big threats here, you know, weakened for Maksim. So now the Goldengo is the last threat where, even if you don't KO it, if you can get it into, you know, low health range so the Delphox can maybe come back in later and then just kind of clean up, I think that's still a decent position. Amoonguss is going to come back in here now, and Sneasler is just going to protect for now.
Protect from Sneasler, a very defensive play on a turn where I don't think it was under that much threat. With the Psychic Seed up, even though it did drop its defenses with that close combat, it should be able to live a Make It Rain from this Golden Go. But instead, we just see the Golden Go take out the Indeedee. And now it's a KO for Juan Manuel, but it's free repositioning for Maksim. So we'll see if the Delphox comes back in or if there is something else in the back. Because now with the Flamigo not on the field, the Delphox is free to start clicking that Heat Wave. And Amoonguss has taken one turn of sleep, so there's a chance it wakes up this turn, but Maksim could maybe still gamble on it staying asleep, or maybe just double down that Amoonguss slot with both Pokemon to try and secure a KO.
Yeah, and the Delphox is going to come back in here, as you said, without the Flamigo on the field right now. Very, very safe for it to just come in here. And, you know, if Maksim manages to, you know... Of course, the Flamigo is still full HP in the back, so it could switch in here and hang on with its Focus Sash. But that is risky for Juan, of course, because if the Sneasler hits into the Flamigo as well, then that's just going to go down. So maybe, yeah, Juan really has to be careful here how he repositions himself. Amoonguss is going to switch back out, so, you know, almost back to full HP now, but it is just going to be the Incineroar coming in here, lowering the attack on the Sneasler even more. And Goldengo just gonna go for a Protect, so maybe Juan probably hoping for the Incineroar to just go down here, which is gonna go down to the close combat. And now Juan is in a position where he can bring back in his Flamigo and threaten some White Guards.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting again to see what this Delphox locked into. I don't read Spanish very well, but I think that is Heat Wave. So, given that that's locked into the Heat Wave, now the Flamigo can come in and threaten with that Wide Guard that we mentioned earlier. So that kind of forces the Delphox to switch, if it doesn't want to get hit by a big Shadow Ball. But also, there's now the mix-up from one side of, if I think the Delphox is going to switch, do I even bother clicking Wide Guard? Do I just go on the offensive there? Because if that back-end Pokemon is... Well, actually, I say that. There's no switch-ins left for Shadow Ball, really, here.
No, I don't
potentially be a problem for... That could be a problem for Maksim, I think. There's nothing in the back there. We've seen the Annihilate and the Dragapult as the two Pokemon that he's brought in the back end for the last two games. And neither of those are going to want to take a Shadow Ball very well.
Yeah, and the Sneasler just, you know, having been intimidated, you know, is doing so much less damage here. You know, Goldengo taking that Throat Chop surprisingly well. Or I guess in this case, not very surprising anymore. And yeah, the Heat Wave is just going to get blocked by that Wide Guard. And Goldengo is free to just actually go for another Make It Rain here. You know, I guess not really being in a rush to take out the Delphox since it is kind of stuck here right now. But the Sneasler taking so much damage, and now Maksim really has to consider a switch here for the Delphox. Because, you know, if you only have two Pokemon left and you're stuck using Heat Wave the whole game, Flamigo just, you know, can go for Wide Guard all day long.
I think the other side of that coin is that the Delphox staying in here is pinning the Flamigo. If Flamigo clicks anything other than Wide Guard, then suddenly you're in a very awkward spot because the Heat Wave's going to hit both your Pokemon, potentially. But if you just stay in and click Wide Guard forever, then you've effectively taken that one slot off the field. You've got Sneasler's Diaclaw, which can potentially get something out of the... maybe like a paralysis or a sleep that could stop it from clicking Wide Guard. Instead, we are just going to see the Throat Chop coming out again. That's going to be a Golden Go dropping to that final Throat Chop. And now it's down to the last two Pokemon on Juan Manuel's side.
Yeah, actually good point on your side to mention that maybe it is the Delphox keeping the Flamigo here stuck, because, you know, Sneasler, of course, although it has been intimidated, still, you know, two-hit KOing that Goldengo, and Amoonguss, not known for its offensive pressure. So yeah, this Flamigo, kind of the only offensive Pokemon here for Juan left, and has to, get these KOs on Maksim's Pokemon. Can't really do that if it keeps going for wide guards.
Yeah, very much. I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me. We do see the wide guard coming out again. No switch from the Delphox. Could have maybe switched out to reset the move that it's locked into, go for a Psychic move instead of that Fire-type move it's been clicking so far. But instead it just stays and goes to the Heat Wave into that wide guard again. And now Amoonguss has to try and wake up this turn if Juan Manuel wants to squirrel his way out of this situation.
And I believe it's still asleep. Yeah, really gonna... This is gonna be a close one, because, yeah, this Flamigo can take maybe one more Dire Claw, and, hopefully doesn't go to sleep. And then the Amoonguss has to wake up and, maybe get a score off on the Sneasler. Delphox is gonna finally switch out here into the Dragapult. Is the Flamigo gonna go for another wide guard? Yes, it is gonna be another wide guard, and I'm guessing Sneasler is gonna go for another Dire Claw here. So, yeah, not sure what's gonna happen yet this turn. Are we gonna see any status? It is gonna be another Dire Claw sleep there from the Sneasler. Is Amoonguss gonna wake up? It is gonna wake up.
Everything's sleeping. Amoonguss says, no, that's my job. How dare you?
Everything may be asleep. But I'm wide awake, sorry.
No more wide guard in play this turn for the Flamigo being asleep, which means this is a very safe Dragon Darts. So if Dragon Ball goes for the Dragon Darts here, if Amoonguss doesn't go for a Rage Powder, then Flamigo is going to faint. But if Amoonguss does go for a Rage Powder, then Flamigo is going to take no damage, but it's going to stay asleep this turn, and the Amoonguss is going to take a lot of damage and potentially get KO'd. And also, crucially, it's not going to be able to get a score off.
Yeah, and the Flamigo just going down to a Dragon Darts here. Sneasler going to sleep, but that's not really gonna matter at this point. Dragon Darts here. Yeah, Amoonguss taking that fairly well, and okay, gonna go for another score, but yeah. The only offensive move, or I mean, the Amoonguss does have Pollen Puff and Sludge Bomb, but this Dragapult is still at full HP, so Amoonguss is, never gonna take out any of these Pokemon in time. And yeah, what a comeback from Maksim, in my opinion, in that third game especially.